The following is an extract from the diary of Ludwig Leichhardt, written in 1842. It describes the Bunya fruit gatherings, where Aboriginal tribes came together to harvest the fruits, engage in ceremony, and settle disputes with their neighbours. On the previous Wednesday, the 27th of December, I went with Mr. John Archer and Mr. Waterston and 3 blacks, who carried the necessary provisions, to Burun, a place about 30 miles east-northeast of Archer's station. During the ripening of the bunya fruit, the blacks assembled there from all regions of the near and far neighbourhood, partly to eat the fruit, but partly to fight with enemy tribes. On the 28th of December, we continued our march and soon came to one of the spurs of the mountain, climbing up to the dense scrub, which covers the sides and the ridge of the mountain. After a 4-hour walk on the narrow, often barely recognizable path crisscrossed with prickly vines and woody creepers of all kinds, we finally came to the other side of the mountain and to a free tract of forest on a spur sloping towards the north, on which a friendly tribe had set up their camp. Our blacks immediately built a hut for us and for themselves, and we indulged in the bunya fruits that our hosts brought in abundance. Next morning I went to Burun with Mr. Archer, which is about 5 miles further. It is a narrow flat with few trees, with good grass growth enclosed around by mountain ranges, which are covered by thick scrub. We saw a crowd of blacks here, all ready for fighting. However, because the fight, of which they told us, did not seem to be going to take place, we returned to our camp, the more so because the weather by no means favoured us. When I went with Gumarigo and Kippernose to get bunyas, of which we found 6 on a tall tree, old Abel came and obligingly searched for trees in flower. We discovered one tree unknown to me in full bloom, which had fully the perfume of the common lilac. Old Abel called it Thawan Vawan, and I have entered it under number 65 in my wood register. On the trip to Burun, I found beside Melastoma a new red, spotted orchid whose beautiful flowers fall off on drying in an incredible way. The bunya tree is very abundant here, all around Burun. Occasionally we saw 4 to 5, hardly 100 paces from one another. It is a huge, handsome, majestic tree, often 17, 18, 20, 24 feet and more in girth. Its slender trunk strives upwards far over the trees of the scrub before it forms the crown. This is oblong, and the branches, although perhaps originally springing regularly from the trunk, cross one another and hang irregularly in confusion. Only the apices of the branches seem to be covered with foliage and are similar to a fan in which the fruits hang. The black recognized and counted the fruits at a height of perhaps 180 feet, while I was not able to discover them like my sharp-sighted companion. He laid the bush vine around the trunk, fastened it with his left hand in a loop, while the right gripped the other free end, and immediately climbed quickly up the immense tree, always jerking the vine further upwards before him. Arriving at the crown, he broke off the fruit and threw them down. You could hear them whistling through the air, and their fall on the ground is heard very far off. 4 to 6 fruits were on the trees, which the blacks climbed for us. They now took the cone, which is almost 1 foot or 10 inches long and 8 inches wide, and dashed it on a sharp stone, which split it into 2 ends. With great rapidity, they tore the nuts free from the surrounding scale and loosened the kernel from the woody, fibrous rind. They mainly use their teeth for this. If you don't know how, it is a very slow business, and you never get a complete kernel. Many of the scales have nuts without kernels, and usually the scales of the apex are without kernels. The taste of the nuts varies. The blacks said they were best when the sun does not stand high, therefore in the early morning and evening, and probably in overcast weather. If the nut is young and the circumstances are favorable, the bunya kernel tastes extremely tender and sweet and strangely aromatic. If the circumstances are unfavorable, it is either watery or without aroma. The aroma disappears if they are just roasted or boiled. The blacks eat extremely large numbers, and they are never fat. Indeed, just as soon as we started, we could not stop ourselves, as they almost never leave behind a satisfactory feeling of appeasing the appetite. I ate a large number, raw, roasted, and boiled. I think they do not differ in respect to digestion in these various states. They acted on me slightly purging. If I had eaten bunyas in the evening, copious soft excretion would take place 18 to 24 hours later. My white companions did not suffer at all, but one of the blacks did suffer like me. The fig nera is also a very agreeable, slightly tart fruit. It is about 1 inch long, fleshy, but with many dry kernels inside. The blacks only eat those which have fallen from the tree. They squash them and press the dry kernels out before they eat the fruit. The trees are usually very tall. Of the mammals, only one kangaroo was seen, which fled before the dog got sight of it. It grazed on the young grass covering the hills and depressions south of the river. Of birds, several king parrots in pairs were seen when we went to Bunya, and a native turkey of the size and form of a turkey was shot. Its strong toes, armed with powerful nails, assist it to heap the leaves and earth together. It only rarely sounds a short clucking call. Head and neck are naked and covered with red folded skin. Several species of pigeon inhabit the scrub. One queet, like the turtle dove, the other wampo, has a very peculiar hollow call. Only the carpet or diamond snake, which the blacks call wongai, is found in the scrub. Moreover, of reptiles, dualim is frequently found. My black companions discovered another species of sleeping lizard, with dark back and lateral bluish spots, in a hollow tree trunk in the river scrub. In the grass on the footpath lay a death adder, which the black's eye, however, spotted before he or I, who followed him, came into dangerous contact with it. The rainy weather probably prevented the call of the cicada being heard in the scrub, as I suspect that some species also live in the scrub. In the streams and moist earth lives the crayfish, a delicacy of the blacks, which they call blank, and many leeches cling to the shoes and on the travellers themselves, particularly in rainy weather, and bleed them against their will. A host of dark plain or striped julus sit under the bark. The scorpion is sometimes seen, but I did not notice scolopendra. I will mention, too, that I found a species of annelid under the tail of the crayfish, whose head ended in 5 small finger-like appendages. The skeetos were hardly noticed at all, but I saw the elster fly again, which I saw so frequently on Peary. So as to retain the feelings of the moment, I will copy what I wrote down in my memorandum book on the first evening of our journey. What a magnificent night of the 26th of December! A light draught of air moves on the hills along the valley, in which a stream runs between tree ferns in the deepest dark of dense trees twined around by bush vines. Tall ferns cover the forest floor, in which Binnarowan raises its noble trunk and its tall crown that is now decorated with white, honey-scented flower racemes. A cheerful but too vigorous fire rises in the air before our hut, which the blacks built from broad sheets of bark on a huge fallen Binnarowan trunk. In the stream some frogs appear, and crickets sound a metallic chirping. These are the sole voices of the night. In the scrub, a host of bright phosphorescent bodies lay on the ground. When I investigated them, I found that they were leaves. The blacks prop 2 wooden sticks against one another, on which they lean a third diagonally, placed towards the fire, and then lay the bark over this frame. Or they just stick many other sticks in the ground and lean them on the first 2, and then cover them with grass. On our march to the Ninga Ninga, Mr. Archer leaned the 3rd stick to the back instead of towards the fire, whereby, in fact, the opening became free. But the roof of the hut did not jut out so wide and so protectively. The blacks immediately saw the error and laughed at the otherwise so able architect. During our travel, I had several contributions to my knowledge of the blacks. The day before, when I was occupied in the bush with collecting specimens of wood, Nicky carved a small piece of wood, about 7 to 8 inches long and hardly an inch wide and 2 lines thick, narrowing at both ends. He bored a hole through this at one end, tied a cord of 3 to 4 feet on it, and fastened this like a whip on a stick. Then he swung the little piece of wood around his head. It began to hum and to buzz and to roar, and as he lashed with it like a whip, it produced such a peculiar penetrating sound that I let my axe fall quite astonished and watched his activity. He called it pananpada, and told me that the children, kippers and women must not see it, that the elders make them believe it is the voice of the devil and he is coming to eat them, and that they anxiously hide themselves when they hear it. On Warraba Creek and Pine River, they have a longer, similarly formed instrument, with which they produce a hollow sound, but which probably is not able to vibrate with such pulsation. They were very modest in their explanation of the act of copulation. I was curious inasmuch to know further particulars, as it was just said at the Gwydir that the woman sits on the thighs of the man, who is sitting on his feet, which seemed to me very unlikely. Here the woman lies on her back, raising and spreading her legs. Thus there is no difference between the copulating of whites or blacks, and they are not closer to animals by copulating from behind. In the camp before Buran, I saw only young men and boys, with few female children and no young women. I wondered about this, and thought perhaps they took less care in the upbringing of female children than the males. But this is wrong. When I came to Buran, I saw a large crowd, and almost exclusively children of female gender and young girls of 10 to 12 to 14 years of age. Some of these grown-up girls were very charming creatures. They were small, but extremely well-proportioned, and it seemed they showed the same youthful pertness and the joyful wild spirits that has filled many a European girl of the same age as well, with the difference that they moved their well-formed bodies and their finely formed limbs most gracefully and extremely freely. The face itself was acceptable, but the flatly pressed nose in the face of the male and female blacks always remains an insurmountable obstacle to approach the ideal European beauty. However, the artist would not get weary of observing and studying their bodies, be it that he admired the play of their back muscles when he walked behind them, be it that he saw them throwing and swinging spear, woomera, and wadi, be it that he viewed their groups sitting, lying, and squatting. It is true that very old women with swollen stomachs, hanging breasts, folded and shriveled inguinal regions, and thin feet often mix among them disagreeably. However, this is the shriveled human form, which of course is not concerned with the judgment of human beauty. Fat men and women are never seen, and the largest lump of fat would alone be possible to keep the plump forms in old age. Several powerful male figures were seen among the warriors at Buran. They had painted themselves red. As I heard, this is said to often signify mourning, perhaps for the death of Ubi Ubi. They received us with signs of great joy, and the old women sang songs about our arrival. The meeting of Nicky and his wife again seemed very affectionate, although sparing of words. He took his 2-month son in his arms, regarded him with pleasure, and kissed him. He seemed to show him great tenderness. The young women mix among themselves, never among the men. The elders have a seemingly deciding, or at least very influential vote. The blacks living in the bush find fault with those who join the whites and live close to the stations. In the war song, he reproaches those who no longer come to hunt kangaroos and to catch possums, and who don't take part in the battles, and are rendered weak from living too much with the whites. Then he sings, "Why do you not give me women, kangaroo skins, pipes and tobacco, and hatchets? I gave you all these, and you give me nothing. The accused answers, usually with an excuse. I do not live in the dwelling of the whites. The whites are angry with me. I have no pipe, no tobacco, no hatchet. I live in the bush. As long as the black who enters into communication with the whites exposes himself to the criticism of his brothers, the less is to be hoped of his attachment. That is, as long as the wild population in the scrub remains isolated from the whites. Some tribes live continually in the Bunya scrub. Others come there only at the time of maturity of the Bunya fruit and return back to their home after the harvest in 1 or 2 months. We had several conversations about their doctors. It is something quite extraordinary for a man to go alone into the bush and remain out alone for several nights. The blacks are so very frightened to be alone. They call the devil that leads them from one place to another Mani, and another Doran, who comes when a woman dies. When they come back to the tribe, they pretend to have swallowed stones, to have spoken with the devil, and to have often been moved from one place to another by him. If such a black meets 2 or more other enemies, he can sink into the earth and appear again at a safer place. Humarigo, a kipper, pretends to be able to do all this, and the others believe him. He makes up corroborees when he bathes in a waterhole and says that the devil inspired him. I often was amazed to see with what freedom he dined everywhere too. Without further ado, he claimed his share of the Bunya fruits. He never climbed a tree, but let the others do this hard work. Our blacks told us that the women in the Bunya scrub would call to us as follows: "We are afraid of you. We are not your enemies. We only came here to collect the Bunya fruits." It seems that the Bunya blacks and those of the sea coast eat certain parts of the corpse of the dead. The blacks around Archer's Station do not do this, or perhaps only very old people. Venereal disease is already emerging among them. Barney had lost almost his entire glands. Boils in the inguinal regions and between perineum and buttocks are frequent. They don't seem to be venereal. The women of Brisbane and the coastal blacks are very frequently venereal. I was told that their corroboree balimbons imitated the call of the king parrot. The coastal blacks have a corroboree song, in which they glorify the arrival of the first ship. They told me some more of Calabar or Dagan, that unknown animal which is said to live in deep water holes and which creeps along over the blacks during the night and is said to even bite them. When we returned, the blacks looked for the transparent gum of the dogwood mambo bill, which they eat.